and we're going to be actually talking about marital breakdowns and where the area that, could have so much issue. And we're going to be even talking about mental illness and finance and, big issues in the relationship, especially for high achiever women. Hi everyone, my name is Sindy V. King. I am a relationship and dating coach for executive and high achiever. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, thumbs up, and share. If you're just coming back, welcome. Today I actually have a special guest. Her name is Jennifer Price, and she is a marriage expert. And we're going to be actually talking about marital breakdowns and where the area that, could have so much issue. And we're going to be even talking about mental illness and finance and, big issues in the relationship, especially for high achiever women. And how do we communicate in these areas? So, and she has this famous thing, and a firm believer, to whom much is given, much is expected. So she has a wonderful Facebook group, and it's actually called The Marriage Matters, and where she interacts and gives advice to people from worldwide, which is so great. So everybody, I'd like everyone to welcome Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to be talking about relationship and marriage failures and disasters and what we're going to do about it. So it's a really great interesting time to talk about this.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on in the relationship world, and every single day we're making more discoveries on communication and connection and how to improve relationships. So it's really an exciting time, I think.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your background story, why you got doing in this area and not like helping single people?
Yeah. So I was married many moons ago and divorced. Gosh, it's been over 10 years, maybe even 11 years now. And at the time, I was desperately looking for someone that could help me and my husband and help our marriage. And I couldn't find anyone. We worked with several counselors. We worked with a couple of priests, and nothing really helped. They were little Band-Aid, what I call Band-Aid fixes, where it would help short term. The counselors definitely helped us short term, but it wasn't a really solid fix. Certainly nothing that would carry us long term. So we ultimately, after 2.5 very long years of counseling and a lot of work, we ended up separating and divorcing. And it really was one of the most difficult things that I've lived through, and something that I would not wish on anyone. When the sting of that wore off, I spent years reading and learning and searching and trying to understand what happened. What could I have done differently? What could he have done differently? What could a professional have done differently to help us? And after years of healing, a lot of personal development for myself, a lot of understanding, and a lot of education, I figured out what went wrong, and I realized it's not that hard of a fix to really get into the root of the issues in a marriage. It's really not that difficult. So I went back to school and started studying, and I devoted the rest of my life to helping couples not have to go through what I did. And so now I help couples worldwide not only save their marriage, but I give them tools and strategies, and I teach them how to create a really beautiful, passionate, fulfilled, successful relationship. So that's how I got into this, and absolutely love it.
That's amazing. I could totally relate some of that story with many of my clients as well, because, before they became single, they're like, I went to counseling, I read self-help book, I done everything, and I don't want to give up on my marriage. How do I resolve that, right? So I'm so excited to be talking about specifically about mental illness that we might have with our partners. So how should we talk about mental health in our relationship or our supportive partner in like the area of addiction or mental health issues? How do we talk about this in a relationship?
Yeah, it certainly can be a very touchy subject, especially for the person who is suffering mental illness or addiction. And also, I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding regarding both, but especially mental illness. A lot of people come to me and they say, "I have a mental illness and I need help. You know, it's devastating my marriage." And I'll ask, "What is your mental illness?" And they'll say, "Well, I have anxiety or I have depression." And from my understanding, anxiety and depression, most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, is really not a mental illness. It is a short-term problem due to something in your life that needs attention. I look at anxiety and depression much like the symptoms that you get when you have the flu. When you have the flu or a virus, you become nauseous, you may get sick, you develop a fever, aches and chills, and the fever is your body's immune system fighting something that needs attention, whether it's a bacteria or a virus. And so it's the body's way of saying something's going on, something needs attention. I look at anxiety and depression in the exact same way. Anxiety and depression, most of the time, is your brain's way of alerting you to a problem, to say something needs attention. Now, anxiety and depression, we could do a whole segment just on anxiety and depression, so I'll try to wrap it up quickly so we don't go too far down a rabbit hole. But anxiety and depression both are, to me, there's three causes, and only three causes in the entire world that cause both anxiety and depression. One is a past trauma or a very painful experience that you have not dealt with. It still needs attention, still needs healing or understanding or working through. The second reason is your current circumstances. Maybe what's going on in your life is not really exactly like your blueprint for your life, like what you expect, what you hope for. It could be that you are in, a bad relationship, an abusive relationship. You're in a career that you absolutely don't enjoy at all. Maybe there's a lot of stress at work. But there's current circumstances going on that need attention. And the third reason for anxiety and depression is physiological. So it could be a brain chemical imbalance, but what I have found in my practice, and everyone in my industry that I speak with agrees, so far that I've talked to anyway, 99% of the time, if it is physiological, it's usually diet or environmental related. So you could have an intolerance like gluten or dairy. You could have food allergies going on, but I would say clean up your diet would be the first recommendation, and get a full health workup. Whether it's yourself or your spouse, recommend an entire body workup, blood work, everything, just to make sure that you're not missing something that way. Hormonal imbalances can cause anxiety and depression. Sleep issues can cause both. And so I would say really have a look at your health. If you believe that it's physiological, have a look at your health and see what's going on. And I think it's maybe 1 or 2% out of all cases of anxiety and depression in the US anyway are actually a mental illness where there's a brain chemistry issue where medication is needed. But I would say have a full workup with your doctor. Talk to your spouse about these things because antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications are also known to cause anxiety and even suicidal tendencies. And to me, again, that is another Band-Aid fix. It's something that's going to help you short term, but it doesn't fix the problem. It just helps mask the symptom. So how do you approach this with your spouse? How do you talk about it? I would say just, it depends on if you're the one suffering or if it's your spouse suffering, but either way, just sit down and have a very candid conversation. Put yourself in a place of heartfelt love before you enter the conversation so that you don't come across as aggressive. I would say watch your body language and your tone of voice as much as the words you use, because I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think it's like 70, 73, 75%, maybe 78% of communication is nonverbal. It's your facial expressions, it's your tone of voice, it's your body language. So really have a look at that for all communication too, but especially for something that's as sensitive a subject as mental illness. Now, addiction, a whole completely different animal. I have a program that I put people through if they are married to someone with an addiction. It's a 90-day program. It's very detailed, very complex, but I walk them through step by step by step. But the initial conversation maybe should actually not be with your partner instead, but be with a professional to find out how to approach your spouse, because that's if you do it the wrong way, you can really set them back and set your relationship back and put yourselves in a position where the help that they need is going to be much further off in the distance because you've done so much damage in the way that you did approach it. So I would say before talking to your spouse about an addiction, that especially that they have, if it's you and you're ready for help, that's a completely different ball game. Then you're ready to jump in and get to work and approach your partner and say, look, I'm addicted to shopping, spending money, pornography, gambling, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, and I want help. I need your support. This is the research that I've done. This is how I think we should handle it, but I would love your opinion. Let's go talk to a professional. I really want to beat this. If it's your partner that has the addiction, then definitely talk to a professional first, and specifically an interventionist, because how you handle that can really make or break the total outcome and the success, and whether or not it even saves their life, depending on how severe the addiction is. There's a great book that I recommend. What is it called? It's called Love First is the title of the book. It's by Jeff and Deborah J. And it really addresses all of the misunderstandings that surround addiction and how to conduct a proper intervention with people. There's this old adage that says that if a person is not aware that they have an addiction, if they're not aware that it's a problem, if they're not willing to admit it themselves and they're not willing to get help, then they're not ready. That is an old wives' tale. It's not true. I know many people who have been in a position where they've had a severe addiction to something, even hardcore drugs, meth, crack or cocaine, and we're able to go in, and if you conduct the intervention correctly, they might know that it's a problem, but they're not willing to admit it, and they're certainly not wanting help in the moment. But if you conduct that intervention correctly, through a lot of love, and you go step by step, like described in the book, then that person will be willing to get help even if they're not wanting it. And if they're just willing to go, then when they're in the facility, then the rest is history. Then they usually do really well. So talk to a professional before you talk to your spouse or your partner, if it's your partner who has the addiction. But yeah, addiction and mental illness, completely different animals.
Wow, I think you made a really strong point for all these components. And I really like to add on one thing about addiction as well. Like you were mentioning earlier, it could be environmental factor, genetics. It could be it's the same thing with drinking and alcohol, all that type of addiction. It's still, those are the same factor. I think they have very similar factors, but they're different like areas of mental illness that could actually happen to them with your partner. So that being said, like, what about if your partner is really like wanting to talk about like finance? Because, if mental illness is an issue, what about our finance? How do we, it's such a sensitive topic to talk to your partner about like our finance. And it becomes very vulnerable. A lot of men that I find that men really pride about their finance and they don't want anybody else to be aware of it or to know about their money and how much they make and things like that. It's a very territory place.
Yeah, finances, believe it or not, are the #1 cause for arguments and divorce in the U.S., which, I kind of laugh at a little bit because it can so easily be remedied. But it does take humility. You have to push your pride aside. It does take a lot of self-discipline to adhere to budgeting and your plan and so forth. But I think I have a couple of suggestions that I think are key to fostering healthy conversations, and not just conversations, because you can talk all day long, but if you don't act on it, you're going to end up in the same place, right? And so I have several recommendations that I work with my clients and I write about on my blog and interviews and everything, and I'll share them with you. First, I think that money has nothing to do with your emotions. It has nothing to do with the heartfelt connection that you share with your partner. Therefore, when you're discussing finances and sitting down and planning and going through everything that we'll talk about in a minute, you really need to check your emotions at the door. Leave your emotions out of it. And approach it more from a business or professional standpoint. Because look, even though when you're married and you're sharing everything, including money and accounts, even though that's part of your relationship, you still have to handle it in a professional manner. Otherwise, you're going to end up broke. You're going to end up in debt. You're going to end up with a lot of fighting, maybe even divorce, when it's just completely unnecessary. So my first recommendation is to open up all accounts to each other. Even if you're not sharing accounts, you still need to give each other access to your accounts so that you can look, so that you can help each other make recommendations, so that you're on top of everything. It needs to be total transparency present. Total transparency present in your relationship regarding finances. You need to know what you're both spending money on, where you're saving, and what the whole plan is overall. So total transparency. Second tip is to sit down and have meetings with each other. Now, if you're prone to fighting and blowing a gasket when you're talking about finances, I recommend meeting in a coffee shop. Take your computers, take your checkbooks, go have a meeting someplace in public where you're less likely to blow a fuse, where you're less likely to have a nasty tone of voice, and where you're more likely to be a little more present because people are watching, right? But have a meeting with each other, and if you can do it at home or in private, even better, because it's just more convenient, obviously. But I would say have a weekly meeting. In the beginning, have weekly meetings. Then you can back it off to monthly meetings. And then you want to do quarterly and definitely annual meetings. And you want to look at overall everything. You want to have a budget in place. You want to have, I like to recommend, but everybody has to find their own groove, right? But I like to recommend the 70-30 principle. And that is, after you pay taxes on your earned income, you take 70% to live off of. That's your utilities, your mortgage, or your rent. And then you allot a little bit of that, for maybe 10% for pocket money or spending money. And then the other 30% goes in equal portions, 10% to donations, 10% to savings, and 10% to investments. But then back to that 70% of utilities and living and pocket money. Each of you get pocket money. And when you spend this pocket money, there should be no judgment, because everybody has differences and beliefs and opinions on, everyone has differences and opinions on how money should be spent and what is appropriate, what's wasting money versus, what would be acceptable. So a man, for example, might think that a foot scrub or more makeup or more beauty products is a waste of money. A female might think that, if he's a hunter or a fisherman, he doesn't need 10 more lures this month to go fishing with. So that might be silly to her or unnecessary. And that's where expectations and judgment play in. So I say leave judgment out of it. Allot yourselves a specific amount, percentage of money, a week or a month, and don't be in each other's face or business about how the other spends money. Leave them alone. That's their money to do what they want, provided that it's not demoralizing to them, to you, or to the relationship. Leave them alone and let them be. Just let it go, right? I also recommend looking at your mindset. Mindset with finances is super, super important, especially when you're coming together and trying to share and live in a peaceful way. There's two main mindsets in all of life, but it really does apply to finances as well, and that is the scarcity mentality and the abundance mentality. With a scarcity mindset, excuse me, you're going to find yourself saying things like, or thinking things like, money is so hard to make, or something like, oh gosh, I'll never get out of debt. You're going to say, you're going to find yourself saying, why is everything so expensive all the time? Gosh, I'll never get ahead in life. You're going to find yourself saying things like that. That's scarcity mindset. An abundance mindset is, you know, thinking things and truly believing there's always enough. I'll always be okay. You'll find yourself saying, I'm going to create what I need and what I desire. There's more than enough money for me. There's more than enough money for everyone. And then you're also grateful for what you already have. And then you find yourself feeling grateful for what's coming ahead. You believe I have more than I need. And if you focus on that, you'll see, like law of attraction, you'll find that if you focus on gratitude, if you focus on what you do have, not on what you don't have, but what you do have, you'll find that more abundance comes your way. So that's my second tip, is looking at your mindset. I also say to develop, I recommend developing a financial mission statement and a plan for your marriage. Decide based on your income compared to your bills, what you're going to allot for spending versus saving. And again, I go back to the 70-30. But you want to have on paper, sit down and write it out and have it on paper, put it on a vision board somewhere in your home where you can see it daily, but have goals for yourself, financial goals, and have dates for the completion of those goals. But you want to get on the same page as your spouse regarding all areas of finance. And there's going to be give and take, there's going to be compromises. But if you work together as a team, you're going to start to see success. And then I say, you know, set a budget and stick to it. And that takes a lot of self-discipline, a lot of sacrifice at times, because you really want to go on this adventure, or you want to purchase this such and such for your house, or do a home renovation project. But you really have to set that budget. Now, when you make a list of your financial goals, I also recommend putting them in order so that you can concentrate on the most important first. And also realize that, and this kind of goes back to mindset too, but a lot of people are afraid of having money. You know, they grow up, especially and I'm Christian, so I'm not dissing the Christian religion when I say this, but a lot of Christians have this mentality that money is the root of all evil. And I think that may even be in the Bible. The root of evil maybe, but is money itself evil? I don't believe so. I think money is great, you know? And I think that that's where that mentality comes from, is from that saying, that from the scripture, that money is the root of all evil. So people misunderstand what that means, and they think that money is going to, if you come into a lot of money, if you're really successful and you make a lot of money, it's going to make you greedy. It's going to corrupt your life. And I just want to say, I think money is great, and I think that money makes you more of who you already are. So if you are a greedy person, you're going to become more greedy. But if you have a very generous heart, you're going to be able to do a lot of good with that money. You're going to become more generous. You have more abundance. You have more to give. So you're going to do a lot more good. So money itself is not a bad thing. It can be used on bad things for sure, but it itself is not bad. And I think when you look at it this way, it helps people eliminate the fear that they feel of coming into money. That can be kind of a scary thing. My last tip is to contribute, and which may sound funny for a couple, especially if they are financially struggling, but it goes back to the 70-30 rule. And in that 30%, you know, 10% savings, 10% investment, 10% donations. And I really feel that, you know, even if it's $10 a month, give back somehow, because if you're giving back to society, especially if you find a charity that you both love, it promotes teamwork, and it fosters that connection for the two of you. It gives you a goal to work on, and then you end up feeling really good about the things that you're doing. And you should, because that is a beautiful thing to be able to give back. So find a charity, a church, an organization, you know, find something that you both like, that you both, you know, feel from your heart would be a good cause. And every month give back, even if it's $5, $10, just do something to contribute. And that, believe it or not, will actually help improve your connection as a couple.
I think what you said is so amazing because as an ex-forensic accountant, you must be some sort of accountant in some way. It's exactly, I love it. Um, I want to share a little tip about what I have used in the past as for couples. There's a really wonderful app. It's called Mint. And this is one way that you guys can look at each other's finance, and it gives you update reports, and so that you are kind of pre-prepare before going into the meeting. So it's not like a daily, like, what did you spend? Like, why did you buy this battery? What is this? You get updated like on real time. So I think that's a really great way. I love technology. I think this is where technology can really work really well. So it's not only like you can access their bank account, but you can use like technology to access those things and hold each other's accountable and break certain habits or addictions or whatever that might be. I love it. So working together is a beautiful thing, and it's not like me and I anymore. It's like, let's do it together, the we part, which is amazing. I think that's where it's at. And
Yeah,
so
I think we're on the same page with finances. I think that it makes getting on the same page with a lot of other things in life much easier for a couple. And, you know, it does foster teamwork, it does foster connection, but I have found with my couples that when they get on the same page financially, it makes other forms of communication a little bit easier as well.
yeah, so I think that's a really great place. What is the biggest issue you see in a relationship with high achiever women, and what's the solution for that?
Hmm. This is a really big issue right now, especially in the United States, and you know, in first world countries everywhere, really, because, but especially in the U.S., because in the United States right now we've got this this great movement, really showcasing and highlighting how beautiful women are, how powerful we are, how intelligent we are, and with that comes it's a